STAKK Nation, welcome back to the channel. Today,
champions.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yes, champions. You're all champions. Today, we're going to be talking about de-dollarization.
Lordy.
Over the past year, especially after the conflict in Ukraine, we've seen that the dollar was weaponized, right, by the US. I mean, the dollar has always been weaponized, but we saw it at a level that has never been seen before during this conflict in Ukraine there and Russia.
Yep. Bring down Mother Russia.
Due to this weaponization of the dollar, we've seen that other nations have kind of paused and they're going, hey, we decided to use the dollar because we trusted you and your strong economy. You're going to give us a safe platform to be able to transact with the rest of the world. We do not appoint you as our police officer to determine what we can or cannot do as a country, right? Furthermore, why is it that you're now using this dollar as a way to determine what people can or cannot do? You use this dollar to damage other people's currencies and many other things. Anyone with a brain is going to come to this realization and then maybe reanalyze and see what are the other options.
Yep.
I think most importantly, we've been speaking about this, trying to inform everyone that we can about what is happening and trying to educate people on Bitcoin. Because it seems like a very viable option, considering that the people that we're supposed to be looking to as leaders have no viable option, but interestingly, they seem to keep benefiting from all these chaotic things that are happening.
Up or down.
You could say they're in full control of the situation. Hence, puppet master and strings, keeping all of us where they want us to be.
Preach.
I'll remind you, it's our right to break away from this sort of tyrannical organizations. Now, we've come to a head because we're in an interesting place where they can no longer deny the fact that this is happening. We're going to watch some videos here. We're going to see the head of the IMF, managing director of the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva. I just wanted to say that name because it seems like a really smooth name. I like the name.
You just have to roll that tongue too.
Yeah, it sounds very European.
Yeah.
So we're going to see what she has to say about this de-dollarization, and keep in mind, everything they say is not always accurate, as proven up to this point. And then we're going to move on from that and see what Janet Yellen in the United States are doing about this de-dollarization and the very interesting position that we find ourselves in because of the amount of, how would you say, value or assets that the Chinese hold against America. And of course, we're going to compare that to how BlackRock buying or at least trying to initiate an ETF compares to this strategy. Sounds like a plan?
Let's do it.
Let's jump right into it then. So I'm sharing my screen here. And this first video, Kristalina Georgieva, Managing Director of the IMF. And here is what she has to say.
Let's just call her Christy.
Christy.
American, man. It's American.
Let's see what Christy has to say. All right. This is the Qatar Economic Forum. Let's jump in.
This story of de-dollarization has been with us for some time. The dollar has been going slightly down. It was 70% of reserves. Now it is slightly below 60% of reserves. Understandably, there are other currencies.
Slightly below 60% of reserves means that it is in the 50s. It could be 50, it could be 40. Slightly below 60 is to print an image that 60, it's still above 50, which is more than half.
Play of words.
Wordplay to the max.
But a 10% drop is slightly?
It's massive. Massive. Not 70. We're now at 60. Not only at 60, we're below 60. It's going down, and it's going down fast. Let's go.
Currencies, the euro, Australian dollar, small country, strong currencies that are taking place. We don't expect, though, a rapid shift in reserves. Why? Because the reason the dollar is a reserve currency is the strength of the U.S. economy and the depth of its capital markets.
Pause.
Oh my God! She just blew out our entire thesis on national TV. The strength of the U.S. economy.
Well, before we even get to that strength of the U.S. economy, she says they're not expecting a rapid shift. I think that rapid shift has already happened.
That means you also acknowledge a shift.
There is a shift. There is a shift, and the shift is rapid. Okay? Because when you say there is not going to be a rapid shift, if you've been world reserve currency for decades to this point, and in a matter of a couple years, you're no longer even at 70%. Who knows? They were maybe at more than 70% before that, right? So you have to take that into consideration. You've dropped down below 70%. You've dropped down below 60%. And now you're really in the 50s or 40s because they did not give us a specific number.
That was an article, right? It's like 57, 58 or something.
All right.
Numbers are constantly moving.
There we go. So we're trending downwards. And then not only that now, like you said, the capital markets,
which has been prepped up by debt, U.S. bonds,
China.
Real estate is screwed.
Yeah.
Right now, interest rates 7% to buy a house. Nobody can afford to buy a house.
Nobody can afford to buy. Dude, I was looking at those numbers and I'm like, damn, bro, I'm screwed.
If not for Tesla selling all the cars cheaper, the car industry market is more expensive. People are spending $1,000 a month to buy a 6-year-old car.
That's unreasonable.
With high interest rates.
Yeah.
Majority of Americans are in debt. It's more expensive to go to school. The savings have been destroyed thanks to Jerome Powell.
Yeah. And she just said that the dollar is backed by the strength of the U.S. economy.
No, it's backed by the strength of the U.S. military.
Well, at least in her view, all right, at least in her view, like you said, she already blew out her own thesis. Because you said it's the U.S. economy, but if we look at the U.S. economy, I think we can say that the U.S. economy has been significantly stronger than where we find ourselves today.
How many more trillions did you say we're going to print? Almost $4 trillion?
They just raised debt ceiling. Strong economy.
Yeah.
How do these people calculate these things?
I don't know, man.
Okay. We'll push on then. Backed by the strength of the U.S. economy. Keep that in mind because we're going to come back to that there. All right. U.S. economy and the capital markets. We're going to talk about the capital markets next. Let's finish this up.
Depth of its capital markets. So don't kiss your dollars goodbye just yet.
Did she say that in Qatar? Because Saudi Arabia just said they were going to pay the peg out of the US dollar recently. Didn't they do that like a month ago?
Yeah, that's the Qatar Economic Forum. That's the Qatar Economic Forum.
Okay.
So she said, don't kiss your dollars goodbye just yet. So there is clearly an acknowledgement that at some point you will have to kiss your dollars goodbye.
Another fact.
What are you going to be using in place of the dollar? This is what you have to think about. Will it be CBDCs? Or will it be the ultimate, the most superior asset on earth? Bitcoin.
Can I say something about CBDCs real quick?
Go ahead.
As long as there's an human factor, people will always have agendas.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard for you to convince another country to take their own CBDCs because every country has their own agenda. Bitcoin is global. Everybody is in the game. Yes. There's no central, there's no one president or one president that changes authority that now manipulates or changes it.
Hey. As it turns out, Ethereum might be a CBDC too.
Hey, China's already pushing it.
Exactly. Incredible. Now let's talk about this part where they say the dollar is backed by the capital markets of the US. Look at this tweet here. America is preparing for China's $859 billion treasury dump. De-dollarization nightmare. As Janet Yellen admits de-dollarization will drive the dollar's decline. Let me take this again. As Janet Yellen admits de-dollarization will drive the dollar's decline, U.S. Congress is afraid of a massive treasury dump from China.
Japan can't save them. I think Japan is the number one, then it's China, then it's Russia. And you're constantly fighting war with Russia.
So the economic strength that she speaks of is being held by the opposition.
Boom.
Let's hear what Helen has to say then.
Did a tabletop exercise And in response to sanctions against a Chinese scenario where there will be an invasion of Taiwan, the scenario was that China, the second largest foreign creditor of U.S. Treasuries, would dump that $859 billion in Treasury securities. How are you working with our allies internationally and also the Federal Reserve to deal with a situation where China would dump that volume of Treasury securities overnight?
So we are not engaging in specific exercises to address such a risk, but the United States, the National Security Council, is certainly concerned on an ongoing basis.
Well, Madam Secretary, I would encourage Treasury to make preparations and be on the ready for that scenario and work with at a table.
There's no action being taken. According to her, there's no action being taken. Why would
Treasury Department is not handling it, National Security is handling it, which goes back to military.
Why would they do something like that, though?
Because the strength of the U.S. economy is the U.S. military, not the U.S. economy.
Yes, but so here's what I say then. If you know that China is going to dump, they are in the position. It's just a matter of when they want to, and they can hang this thing over your head forever.
There's actually YouTube research out there that shows that China has been slowly reducing their holdings.
Right.
So if they're slowly reducing, are they tested?
Well, if they dump the whole thing, let's go to the worst case. If they just dump the whole thing, what would the U.S. do?
China will get heft just as much as U.S. will get heft. We all get heft.
Okay. But then, does that mean that the U.S. is going to now use military force because they dumped?
Remember the one video? Guys, if you haven't watched the video yet, please go and do it. The plan.
Yeah.
Wasn't military an option on the table?
This is true. There was military option.
Okay.
However, I think that the current landscape does not put them in a position of power using the military. All right. We have lost STAKK back there. So here's the thing. I think China is in this position of power, right? We allowed ourselves to get into this position where all these countries now have this capital power to affect the U.S. economy adversely.
Yep.
Because generally, I think what happens is the U.S., let's not say the U.S., the elites in this position, right, would generally suppress other people's economies.
They did that with Syria, Libya, Iraq, Iran, North Korea. We abused the SWIFT system. Right,
while boosting their own economy. Given that all these other countries are familiar with living in this wrecked economy situations, right, how much more bad can it get for them? I think they have less to lose in dumping all those securities than the U.S. does. And I think that is now a thing where these people, instead of trying to fight back for their country, are just looking how they can save themselves.
So if South Africa, Egypt, and the major African nations join BRICS, and maybe they agree to Bitcoin or digital yuan, which
they can agree to anything.
It's a major impact.
They can agree to anything. It does not matter as long as it's not a dollar.
About 2 years ago, before this Ukrainian-Russian war, we did a geographical video about what happens if the East adopts a different currency and Africa follows along. Look at the map and look at the population in those countries.
It will make sense.
Major.
It makes a whole lot more sense than what we're doing right now. It makes I have to find that video because it was some very good information. And if I find it, I will definitely share that. And we can make maybe like a short from it as well. Here's the other part I would like for us to consider in this situation. The same way that China now has this economic power, or at least this power to affect the U.S. economy by dumping all of these securities. We recently did a video about BlackRock buying, or at least the configuration of this Bitcoin ETF and the ability that they have to buy a ton of Bitcoin and be able to do the same thing or hold it over the general public's head the same way China is doing right now. I will point it out again in one more scenario. Remember when the lockdowns was happening and BlackRock was buying all of those houses? Does it not seem to you then that BlackRock can start dumping houses or just mark down houses to affect the market value of houses.
And they will still benefit from it because they're
Insanity.
already trading stocks against it.
Absolutely.
Which is why we think a solution or a counter to BlackRock's ETF is a MicroStrategy trust that buys a bunch of the US bonds and flip it on the US government.
Absolutely. There has to be a counter. We cannot just let people like BlackRock just run wild with these kinds of things. This is why I think if the SEC is going to be approving BlackRock's ETF, they need to go back and approve everyone, and absolutely everyone that has applied for it. Any other thoughts, sir?
This was a very, I don't want to call it intellectual conversation.
It was interesting, for sure.
But it's way beyond intellectual. It's about strategy.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot going on that you and I don't know about. But it's good to stay connected. That's why you should follow STAKK.
Yeah. Before we go, let me just give them some credit. Maybe they have a plan, a strategy, and they're not saying it on camera because they don't want to give out the secret to the enemies. But I will say, as things are unfolding, if they have a plan, I think the time to start implementing it has passed. We need to be able to clearly establish and demonstrate that we are in control of our own economy and that everything will be okay. We do not see that right now. Yeah. Look at that guy back there on the left, by the way. Why is his eye like that?
Hey, they all know that the interest rate hikes are not working.
Yeah.
Keep increasing it. You're just going to destroy the banks.
Hike it to the moon. We don't care anymore. You see? When you abuse your tool, it no longer becomes useful. The same way those sanctions were no longer useful. Listen, you might want to get a foot jack because your arm is going to get tired. Crank up those rates, goddammit. Bitcoin will be unfazed. Period. We hope you found this video helpful, ladies and gentlemen. Please like, share, subscribe to the channel. Comment down below. We'll definitely like to engage with you. Same thing on Twitter, STAKKFin. If you have some ideas of something you'd like us to talk about, please comment it. Leave it as well on Twitter and so on and so forth. And we'll definitely do our best to cover that. We'll do our research and share our information and our thoughts about it. Also on Spotify, we're STAKK, and we're going to be adding Rumble pretty soon as well. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Present out.
Champions, double out.